Hello and welcome, everybody. We're just going to give folks a few minutes to sign in here. So thank you for joining us for this County of Ventura Oxnard Airport Runway Taxiway Pavement Reconstruction Project public meeting. We'll give folks a few minutes and then we'll get started. Those of you who have joined, there will be a link in the chat feature for you to sign in. So if that has popped up, which I see it has, those of you who have signed in so far, please go ahead and take that extra step and fill that out as well. Hello for all of those who have just recently joined us for this public workshop. Thank you so much for taking the time. We're going to give folks a few minutes to sign in here, so just hang tight. And those of you who have signed in, please click the link in the chat feature and fill out the actual sign-in sheet, which will help the project team make sure that you are connected for future communication. So go ahead and do that, and the rest of you just hang out for a few more minutes. Hello to those of you who have joined us so far. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this public meeting. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes to sign in here and get settled. Those of you who are signed in and are waiting, please go ahead and click the chat feature, and there is a link there for you to fill out for further signups. So please take the time to do that. We're just going to give folks one more minute here and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we have a good amount of folks who have signed in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to the County of Ventura Oxnard Airport Runway Taxiway Pavement Reconstruction Project, second public workshop. My name is Stacy Falcione from the outreach team, and I'll be going through some logistics before we get started. This meeting is being recorded, so please be aware. Please sign in through the Google sign-in sheet link that's posted into the chat feature. That will help us, again, add your contact information to our list so you can have further communication. There will be an interactive 3-question survey that we would also like you to participate in the middle of the presentation, so please stay tuned on that. We will also host a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Next, for those of you who are new to Zoom, I'll briefly explain how we will run today's meeting and how you can further participate. We will be turning off the cameras during the presentation so that you can focus on the slides. We will turn the cameras back on during the Q&A period so that you can see the panelists. We will be taking questions after the presentation in 3 ways. The first way is the raise your hand feature. Open the attendees tab and click on the raise your hand feature button. We will call on you and unmute your microphone so that you can verbally ask your question. The second way is through the chat feature. You can enter your question here and we will read your question out loud. And those of you who are only able to call in can also ask a question by pushing *9. We will call on you and unmute your line so that you can ask your question verbally. If at any time you are experiencing technical difficulties, please type your concern into the chat feature and one of our team members will assist you. Please only ask one question at a time to allow for everybody to be heard. We also remind everybody to please be courteous and respectful in all of your comments. I'll now pass it off to Chuck McCormick, Project Manager, who will introduce the project team. Chuck?
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Can we go to the next slide? Great. Again, my name is Chuck McCormick. I'm with Mead & Hunt. We're the design team. And first off, I'd like to do the introduction of Kip Turner. Kip is the Director of Airports for the County of Ventura, along with Aaron Powers, the Project Manager. Kip?
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, team. We have a really good team working hard to put all this together, and we, particularly in this time of pandemic that we're all living in. So thank you to all of our participants that have joined us. We are all anxiously looking forward to the day when we can get back together in person and do these kind of things in person. It's what we all prefer. So in the meantime, this team has done a great job of making it where we can all participate. You can participate, be heard. We encourage that, and please, that's what this is for. So weigh in every opportunity with every question that you have, and look forward to working with you and listening to today's presentation. Thank you, Chuck.
All right, thank you very much, Kip. So you've from the Oxnard Airport, the County of Ventura, that's Kip and Aaron. Myself, Mead & Hunt, we're the design team, the design consultants. So I'm Chuck McCormick, the project manager. And then with me as far as a panelist today is Jeanette Larrera. She's the civil design lead. And then in addition, we have Ariano and Associates managing this public outreach effort. And so you've heard from Stacy, and then we also have Elsa Argomanix, and she's the senior project coordinator for the public outreach. So next slide, please. So let's start off with the purpose and why are we here. So the purpose of the meeting is to provide information to seek your input for the upcoming project at Oxnard Airport. And then we'll also be discussing the project overview and description. And then the proposed airfield changes we're going to go over. And then fourthly, we're going to go over, this is the second tenant workshop. We're going to go over the survey results from the first tenant workshop for those that weren't here for that. We'll discuss phasing alternatives. As Stacy mentioned, we have an additional participant survey, so you'll be able to participate in that. And then we'll go over the future meetings and contact information, and then wrapping it up with a question and answer time frame to answer your questions. So next slide, please. So the project overview has multiple items on here. One is the Oxnard Airport is a public use airport. It's owned and operated by the County of Ventura. It's located in the County of Ventura, west of Oxnard, California. The airport has a single runway. It's designated runway 725 with 5 connector taxiways and 1 full-length parallel taxiway. So this project, as we're describing to you, includes the removal of existing pavement surface and excavation of the subgrade. It's going to include the construction of a new pavement section and crushed aggregate base course shoulder, along with, once the pavement is down, the application of new pavement markings. It will also include an under drain system and adjustments to the storm drain for improved drainage on the airfield, along with installation of new edge lights and MALSEF lights. So the MALSEF is the approach lighting system. That's a medium intensity approach lighting system with sequence flashers. And finally, the project will include installation of new airfield guidance and hold signs. Next slide. So as far as the project description, the project is it's over here, designed and bid as a single bid package. that will consist of a base bid and up to 2 bid alternates. So the breakdown of the project would be as follows, where the runway 725 reconstruction is in what's called the base bid, and then taxiway connectors, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo reconstruction will be in bid alternate 1. And then the parallel taxiway Foxtrot reconstruction will be in bid alternate 2. And for some more information regarding the project would be funded with a combination of county and Ventura funds, along with an AIP grant from the Federal Aviation Administration. Next slide. So this project would entail proposed airfield changes, and these really are in regards to the taxiways. So it's a taxiway configuration, and you can see what's shown in blue in this diagram on the taxiways is what would be modified, and that's some of the taxiway as far as the high-speed connectors are being modified slightly, and which is now taxiway Bravo is being shifted a little bit to the west. And then also, again, the high-speed taxiway is going to remain in place. It's just going to be narrowed down a little bit. And then the taxiway names, and again, these are proposals, not would be changed from, right now it's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and then Foxtrot. The FAA's current design standards, if you have a single runway with a single parallel taxiway, then the connector taxiways are changed from an alpha character like Alpha through Echo to an alphanumeric change designation. So in other words, Alpha would go to Alpha 1, and then all the way through Alpha 2, Alpha 3, Alpha 4, and Alpha 5. And then the parallel taxiway would go from taxiway Foxtrot and become taxiway Alpha. But as a note, though, these changes will only occur if bid alternate 1 is completed as part of the project. If the project only has enough funding to complete the base bid, which is the reconstruction of runway 725, then these proposed changes would not occur at this time. They would happen at a later date. Next slide, please. So here's from the tenant workshop number 1. We had one question as far as a survey, and that question was, what is more important to you? And it was either expedited construction duration, which means close the pavements down and reconstruct them and then open them back up. And that it would be the shortest construction duration. And then the second question was, or is more importantly, limited runway availability more important to you? So that means during the reconstruction of runway 725, albeit it would not be full length would be available, it would be a length shorter to that. And as we showed, and Jeanette will go into this, we would have either 2,100 up to about 2,500 feet available for takeoff and landings. So the results are, we had approximately 42 people submit on this survey, and 20 responded for expedited construction, and 22 replied for limited runway availability. So based on the previous survey, we really narrowed down the design focus on these 2 alternates. However, the county is still committed to hearing you as the tenants, and after the workshop, then we would begin working on what's called the Construction Safety Phasing Plan, or CSPP, which is showing the ultimate phasing of the project, and then that is submitted to the FAA for their review and approval. Next slide. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeanette Lorera. She's going to discuss alternative 1 and alternative 2 for the phasing. Jeanette?
Thank you, Chuck. Yes, so as he mentioned, there were several phasing alternatives that were analyzed, and these were presented in the first workshop. These alternatives took into consideration the safety, the project duration, runway availability, cost, and previous workshop survey results. And as he mentioned we narrowed it down to 2 alternatives. So this first alternative is alternative 1, which is full runway closure with no arrivals or departures. So as you can see in this slide, for this alternative, runway 725 and all the taxiways will be closed. And I will be referencing the taxiways by their current name. So in here, there will be, in this alternative, there will be no airfield facilities available since all the navigates like the PAPIs, the glide slope, localizers, all of them will be turned off. And these alternatives allows for greater concurrent construction operations. So for the duration of this phasing will be approximately 3 to 4 months for the main work element, plus two weeks for additional night closure for grooving and final markings. So please note, even though we're showing that the runway, the connectors, and the parallel taxiways will be closed, some portions of it might be able to remain open if there's no construction happening. So if you need to go from one apron to another one, or you'll still be able to use the taxi lanes outside the hangars. So if we go to the next slide, so an analysis was done to each of the alternatives, considering the safety, the schedule, the budget, and the product quality. So the table here summarizes the evaluation analysis and scoring for the full runway construction phasing alternative. So scoring is provided on a scale from 0 to 10, and a score of 10 indicates an ideal scenario, and a score of 0 indicates an unacceptable scenario and eliminates the alternative from the consideration. So if we go through each of the evaluation criteria, so safety has a score of 9. In this scenario, so basically there will be increased operations at nearby airports, and aircraft operations on runway 725 will be prohibited during runway operations. For construction duration schedule, it will be approximately 3 to 4 months plus the night closures. And this alternative provides the most cost-effective construction operations, scoring 10 points. Since continuous concurrent operations will be allowed for the duration of the work, there will be no transverse asphalt pavement joints in the surface layer course. So what this means is that since the whole parallel taxiway or runway will be closed, the asphalt train will be able to do one continuous pull from one end of the runway or the taxiway to the other end. So it will be a smoother surface. And this also results in a score of 10 points. So if we go to the next slide, we can see alternative 2. So basically looks at having partial runway availability during the construction. So in this alternative, will be a two-phase construction. Basically, the runway will be split in half, more or less. And then in this slide, you can see that for one phase, there will be construction on the west end. So taxiway Delta and Echo will be constructed together with the runway and taxiway portion west of taxiway Charlie. And the runway 25 displaced threshold will be kept at the same location. So this results in the runway length on the east side of approximately 2,500. And so this allows for a 400-foot clearance for safety between construction equipment and aircraft on approach. So in this configuration, most turboprops should be able to operate on this runway, and there will be no touch and goes allowed during construction if this phase is selected. So this also assumes BFR conditions and no runway lights or navigates will be on. Otherwise, if we do this, this will add complexities such as the flight checks, increase duration, and reduce length to meet spacing. So as you can see in this alternative 2, in this slide, you can see that here we'll be doing the construction on the west half of the runway and west half of taxiway Foxtrot, as well as the construction of taxiway connectors Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. I meant to say we'll be doing the construction, it's in the east portion in this phase. So basically, we're gonna be keeping the same 400-foot clearance will be maintained between construction equipment and aircraft on approach. And this results on a runway length of a little bit over 2,500 feet. And so basically for the runway 7 threshold will be based on the taxiway Charlie axis. So there's a potential that if back taxi conditions are allowed during the east runway configuration, therefore we can increase the west side of the runway length so that we have like a more even split on the runway length for both of the facings. So alternative 2 will last approximately 5 to 5.5 months for the main work element and include up to 1 to 2 weeks full runway closures plus the 2 weeks of night closure to do runway grooving and the pavement markings. So we go to the next slide. So the same evaluation criteria and scoring was used for alternative 1 as in alternative 1. So the impacts to safety in this configuration include that a shortened runway will be available for small aircraft and the runway will be reconfigured and there will be aircraft operations over the construction. As mentioned before, there will be no navates, VSATs, or runway lights. Aircraft will be operating under BFR conditions because otherwise, as mentioned before, if we don't do the BFR conditions, it will add more complexity such as the flight checks, reduce length, runway length to meet the spacing and increase duration. So this is scored a 4 for the safety feature. And so also the reduced runway length coupled with the aircraft operations over construction operations will be well vetted through a safety risk management process, mitigating the safety risk to an acceptable magnitude and likelihood by the FAA. So basically, if alternative 2 is selected, we'll have to go through FAA. It's a process, a meeting that we go through all the safety and all the construction scenarios for this alternative, and FAA has to approve this alternative. This process, as a note, it can take months. If we go to the next slide. So basically, if we go to in this slide, as far as the schedule, this alternative will take approximately 5 to 5.5 months for construction duration, and as mentioned before, up to 1 to 2 week full runway closure to do any work where the two phases meet, basically. And there will be limited piston aircraft operations and no turbine aircraft operations. Looking at the evaluation criteria, the two-phase construction reduces construction efficiency and duration results in an increased cost of approximately 1.2 million. This money that could be used to the construction of the connectors or the parallel taxiway. So this alternative will add to runway reconfiguration operations. Therefore, the runway will have to be striped 3 times. So first, the existing marking will have to be removed. Then the first temporary runway will have to be striped. And then followed by the second temporary runway will have to be marked. And then paint from the new temporary runway will have to be removed to paint the final runway markings. So when we do when pavement markings are removed, they're usually done by water blasting. So these could damage the pavement once this process is done. Quality, for the quality evaluation criteria, so this alternative will be impacted by having construction operations divided over 2 phases, which decreases the efficiency, and there will be one planned transverse AC pavement joint. So it wouldn't be a smooth pull from one end to the other end of the runway. If we go to the next slide, so in this slide, you can see the score side to side for alternative 1 and 2. So alternative 1 has 36 points and alternative 2, 22 points as a total. So construction is expected to occur in the summer and fall of 2021, but this is subject to FAA funding. And award of the base bid, the alternate 1, which is the connectors, and alternate 2, the parallel taxiway, is also subject to FAA funding. So the ideal scenario will be to build at least the runway at the connector so that we don't have to close the runway at a future date. So as mentioned in the previous slide, alternative 2 increases construction cost by approximately 1.2 million, which is about 30% of the cost to construct the taxiway connectors. And also alternative 2 will require a safety risk management process because the shorter runway will have to be approved by FAA. And these might impact the timing, start of the construction, and the funding. So now Ariano Associates will explain to you how you can participate in a survey and provide feedback to us.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm going to launch the poll now. And as we have mentioned earlier, the public participation portion is very important to this process. And we have 3 questions for you to participate in the poll today. So I'm going to launch that now. And we'll leave the poll open for a couple minutes, but just to quickly go over some of the questions. The first one, during construction, would you temporarily relocate to Camarillo Airport if there was an opportunity? The second question asks, how often do you fly? And based on the updated information, do you prefer either alternative 1 or alternative 2? So we'll keep that open for a few minutes. And as those responses come in, we are going to go over some of the schedule for the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you very much. As far as the future workshops that are available, and I don't know if the participants can see this on the slide or not because the questionnaire is in front, but I'll kind of go over it. Maybe we move it off to the side or something. The presentation, this same presentation will be summarized at the upcoming Aviation Advisory Committee members meeting, and that's scheduled for December 7th. And then in addition, it's going to be at same summarized meeting at the Airport Authority meeting that's scheduled on December 10th. And as mentioned earlier, this is the second tenant workshop. We plan for a future workshop, which would be the 3rd one, in either late January or early February of 2021. And in case you don't have, or in case you have any additional questions that you think of after today, you can always reach the project team through the project email that's listed below, Oxnard Airport Runway at arianoassociates.com. And then there's also a helpline where you can also leave a question, and that's 909-313-0549. But don't worry if you didn't get that, it is in the presentation. So I think, do we want to keep just keep it open for another minute or so here on the
Yeah, it looks like we only have about 56% who voted, but I think people have joined us through multiple platforms, so that could be a double up. So yeah, we'll leave it open for maybe another minute or so.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt too. So we had a question that pertains to the survey. They're asking which option will the whole, let me read it exactly. Which option is the whole runway at once and which is 2-stage plan?
Oh, okay. So alternative 1 is where the entirety of the runway and the taxiway would be under construction and closed at one time frame. Alternative 2 is where you have reduced runway length, and that's where you have a portion of the runway open, i.e. from 2,100 feet to 2,500 feet, the west side, and then you would have the east side open. But it still also has a total closure of the runway during the change in phasing from the east end to the west end. So alternative 1 is the complete closure. do the construction all at once. And alternative 2 is with limited runway availability or reduced runway length availability.
Okay, great. Looks like we're having a couple more responses come in.
And just to chime in, this is Stacy. So for those of you who are still filling out the survey, you can also move that survey box around so you can see the actual presentation still. So just like Stevie said, we'll give folks just another minute or two and then we will continue on.
Okay, it looks like most people have participated at this point. I don't really see anyone else trickling in, so I will just close it. Okay, and here are our results, just so everyone can see it. Okay, looks like most people will take an opportunity to temporarily relocate to Camarillo if there was an opportunity. If they do fly, they fly once or more per week. And based on the updated information, looks like alternative 1 was more preferred. So thank you everybody very much. Again, as we said, your input is very important to this process. And right now we will continue on with our presentation and go to the question and answer portion of today.
Okay, again, thank you so much for your for listening into this session. And then Stacy, do we want to go ahead and start the any questions that are coming in?
Yes, so thank you everybody. So as we transition over to the Q&A session, we're going to have staff read off some of our questions that we're getting in the chat feature. And Chuck and Jeanette, if you can turn your cameras back on, you guys can be visible for folks that are on Zoom so they can see who's answering the questions. So Josh and Stevie, if you guys want to take it away.
Yes. Yes. Hi. So I'm going to go in order. We have quite a few questions and some more are coming in. So I promise I will get to all of them. So first question comes from Chuck Carter, who asked, what best management practices will be implemented to prevent storm runoff from flowing into 5th Street Drain, Edison Canal, and Channel Islands Harbor?
So as far as the BMPs, I'm going to turn that over to Jeanette to address through the civil design lead that'll be included with the design.
Yes, thank you for that question. So basically for BMPs, we'll be addressing all the BMPs within the construction area. So all the storm drain inlets will be covered with the filter and then with the approved BMP areas per the state of California. So there will be no runoff going into the street from the construction area, if that's the question.
Okay, thanks, Jeanette.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the next question was from Mark Sullivan, and he asked, if alternative 2, does the FAA pay 90% of the $1.2 million?
Yes. So the FAA on availability and eligible costs for the project, the FAA can participate up to 90%. But it also goes in, the FAA only has a certain amount of money available or designated for a project. So we're designing that project according to that budget. So if what can happen is they could pay for it, but what could happen is less of the project could be completed. And that's kind of what Jeanette came to, is if the runway construction is the base bid And then if we're doing alternate 2 with multiple phases, then if that's using up to $1.2 million to handle that phasing, then that's less of construction that could be done on the parallel taxiways if the FAA only has so much money to go around. So yes, it could participate in the 90% of that 1.2 million, but it can take away from available money that could go for construction of the other taxiways. And then if those taxiways are not, let's say we only do the runway, and then the connector taxiways need to be done in a future project, then that would require or necessitate future closing of the runway while those taxiways are under construction, because they're in the object-free area and the runway safety area for construction.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Next question, and it's kind of a comment from Barbara Filkins. The poll is too one-sided and does not present a realistic picture of the questions and concerns that need to be addressed with full closure. She also made this note: my comment is not intended to be taken as a blanket negative. There are businesses on the field. This survey does not address business and economic impacts.
Okay, and duly noted. We thank you for the, your comment on that, and we'll take that under advisement with the county team. And then as the project moves forward in the design, we can have more information for that at the next tenant workshop.
Okay. Next question from Mark Sullivan. He asked, was the use of Taxiway F as a temporary runway for Cat 1 aircraft scored? If so, what was the score? If not, why not?
As far as Taxiway Foxtrot, as a use as an interim runway, we did consider that as an early alternative. We actually took that to the FAA for their review and consideration, and the FAA determined that would not be allowable as an interim runway while the main runway 725 is under construction. And for various reasons, there's objects in what's called the object-free area and the runway safety area if that taxiway is indeed a runway. So yeah, we did take that right to the FAA for the review and consideration.
Okay, and then the next question is from Andrew, and there's a couple here, so I'll read them off. What is the approximate planned start date?
Meaning the planned construction start date, we're planning for June of 2021 is the planned date right now. So if you want to go in with your next one.
Okay, and then the next was just a comment. I don't think alternative 1 versus alternative 2 is clear. And the final question that they had was, how are you weighing the polls regarding the alternative preference? Does the aircraft owner pulling 5,000 gallons per month through Oxnard have the same vote weight as the Cessna owner pulling 15 gallons per month?
So good question. So right now, as far as the way the survey is done right now, each vote has an equal count. So it's right now, it's not taking into consideration the type of user.
Okay. Next question comes from Charles McLaughlin. For alternative 2, will there be night landings?
So for alternative 2, as Jeanette mentioned, it is just a day VFR type of condition. So the runway lights would not be activated. So in other words, no nighttime use would be available, nor IFR would be available either. So just daytime use only in VFR conditions.
Okay, thank you. And next we actually have a hand raised. So Tim McCarran, we're going to go ahead and unmute you and let you ask your question. So I believe Stevie may have unmuted you, so just hit unmute on your end if you can do that.
Yeah, if alternate 1 is chosen, will hangar rents be extended until construction is completed, since we don't have use of our hangars.
Okay, understood. In other words, if during construction, if you don't have use of your hangars, would the rent be reduced? I'm just kind of repeating your question, make sure I capture that.
Extended.
Yep. So the county team is continuing to investigate options, for tenants during the construction, and we expect to have additional information available at the next tenant workshop, which would be early next year. But in the meantime, well, again, for this, we expect to have more information available. Right now we're in the middle of the design and haven't come up with a final determination yet.
That would have been a very important issue to raise when you discuss alternate 1 or alternate 2. You understand my
Yes.
point?
Yes, absolutely. No, thank you. Yeah, I understand it versus alternate 1 or alternate 2 if you've got a reduced rent.
In the context of everything, it should have been included.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we'll move on to our next question from James Schroeder. This is actually just a comment. Evaluation criteria was missing aircraft operation impact. Alternative 1 equals 0, alternative 2 equals 10.
Okay, so that was just a comment.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The next question from Luz Scheibel. For alternative 1, will the tower be closed and Magu ATC would control the airspace? Will the airspace be Class G during construction?
So that's a great question as far as would the tower be open. It's our understanding from the team is the tower would still remain open because the airspace is still in effect. Helicopter activity can continue to take place. So the airspace would still be in effect, the Class D airspace. It would go to Class E or G when the tower is closed, just like it is now. But during construction, the tower would remain open. It would be Class D airspace.
All right. Next question is from Gabriel Tehran. Apologies if this was stated and I missed it, but is there an approximate time window when construction would begin? And what is the duration for alternative 1 versus alternative 2?
And I'll start it off with the planned start of construction would be this upcoming June of 2021. And then for the duration, Jeanette, I'll have you kind of go over the different durations for alternative 1 and alternative 2. So Jeanette.
Yeah, so basically for alternative 1, there will be 3 to 4 months for the full runway closure, plus 2 weeks of night closure to do any pavement markings and the runway grooving. And then for alternative 2, it will be 5 to 5.5 months. And then we might have up to 1 to 2 weeks of full closure to do basically the construction where the 2 phases will connect. So the area in the middle. And then also we'll have the 2 weeks of night closures to do the pavement markings and the runway grooving.
Okay, thanks, Jeanette. So, and like Jeanette mentioned, even in alternative 2, there still is full runway closures associated with that project alternative based on when we're shifting from one phase to the other.
Okay, and there was a second part of that question, and then we'll get to Mark's raised hand. So the second part of this question is also, what are the plans for sound mitigation during the construction phase? What will the general work times be?
Jeanette, I'll let you handle that. What we have what we plan to specify in the project specifications for work times.
So depending on which alternate gets selected, and then we will come up with the construction durations. So that way we can do our best to mitigate the noise during nighttime and daytime too.
Right, so those hours are still being developed as we move through the design. Again, we're only at we're not at the full design period yet, so those hours are still being developed.
All right, thank you for that. The next question, we actually have Mark with a raised hand. So Stevie's going to go ahead and unmute you, Mark. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, my question is, I actually put it in also in the chat window. I've been to a lot of airports in the country that have runways, temporary runways, and even permanent runways that are a lot narrower, a lot less clearance than Taxiway Foxtrot would be. What assumptions were given to the FAA? Was it for all types of aircraft that currently use the airport, or were they asked to address the assumption for Category 1 or even those smaller part of Category 1 specifically?
Yeah, so great question. The assumption it would just be Category 1 or smaller aircraft that would be using Taxiway Foxtrot as an interim runway, and we went to the FAA with that request. They analyzed it and then came back that they would not be able to approve that as an interim runway, at least in this region. So that was their feedback on it. But it was only for smaller aircraft. We were not considering larger twins or turbine aircraft, or obviously jet aircraft to be using that, just the smaller aircraft. And even with that, and based on the layout that the object-free area has and the dimensions for runway safety areas, and because of the obstructions that are out there, or in buildings, the FAA found that they would not be able to approve that for use.
Did they cite, by the way, any specific section of the the AC on airport design, or was it just general?
Well, as far as it wasn't like a specific section, like a paragraph, but they were looking at the object-free areas and the taxiway safety areas and the Part 77 surfaces. So that was their main concern with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go on to the next question. The next question is from Andrew Borden. With the East End Taxiway being relocated toward the west, will the total runway length be reduced?
The total, if I understand your question right, and Jeanette, if you want to maybe clarify if I miss anything, with the modifications to the taxiway is not affecting the overall runway length once the project is complete. So no, the runway length will stay as it is right now. Once the project is completed. The only time the runway length would be reduced is if we were in alternative 2 and you have the shorter reduced runway length available during just the construction phasing. But once the project's all done, the runway stays at its current length and width.
All right, next question we have from Mark Swaney. Without knowing the county will help with relocating to CMA, it's difficult to determine the alternative we would choose. And the second part of that question is, will the county reduce the lease fee since the storage hangars will be unusable during the construction?
And kind of as with that, kind of goes along with the same as before. The county team is continuing to investigate the options for the tenants during the construction period, and we would expect to have additional information available at the next tenant workshop in the January-February timeframe of 2021. So we're taking note of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chuck. And if everyone doesn't mind, there's a few other questions basically asking the same thing, if rents are going to be suspended. So are we good to just, that response applies to those, so I don't need to read off those questions?
That's correct. It's same type of response for those types of questions, yes.
Okay, perfect.
If they're in a similar format.
Perfect. So we'll move on to the next question
Okay.
from Mike Alfred. Would a hangar be available at CMA, as very valuable aircraft sitting out in the bad weather is a non-starter? And then the second part of that question is, would the tower be open during phase 2?
Let me first go off to if meaning phase 2 or alternative 2, the tower is going to remain open whether we're in alternative 1 or alternative 2. Even when the runway is closed, the tower will still remain open And then especially in alternative 2, the tower would remain open because then the runway is open during portions of that construction phasing when you're either in east end of the runway or west end of the runway. As far as the hangar availability at, I believe it was Camarillo Airport, the other county airport, kind of similar to the other, we're still looking at that. Is the county team investigating that? And we would expect to have additional information for you by the next tenant workshop in the January, February timeframe of 2021.
Okay, and our next question was from Andrew Borden again. Do you think FAA will pay 100% if option 1 is selected?
As far as from the FAA side, if it's an AIP grant right now, based on the type of airport Oxnard Airport is, the FAA is limited to 90% participation of the project. So as long as it's eligible project items, and that's determined in what's called the AIP handbook, in which we're following the rules of that. So we would expect that the FAA would participate in 90% of the construction cost, again, based on the availability of the funds. So right now, it's been a long time planning this with the FAA through planning efforts, environmental, and now the design. So they're aware of the construction costs. But again, it would be 90% versus 100% funding, typically.
Right, next question from Barbara Filkins. How does this proposed project compare to the runway construction at Fox? My understanding was that was a total build, but they adopted a plan that shortened the existing runway, not a complete closure.
And I guess as far as I'll address this way, that is a different airport. I'm somewhat familiar with Fox Airfield. We don't do the engineering work for Fox Airfield. That's through the Los Angeles County Department of Airports. I am aware it's a different runway length, but we were not involved with the intricacies of the design of that, and as far as phasing and what airplanes could handle that. So we basically, as far as this analysis, it was looking at the given runway length at Oxnard Airport and looking as far as alternative 2 of what types of aircraft would be able to operate on a reduced runway length from this 2,100 feet or up to about 25 or 2,600 feet length.
Okay, and thank you for that. Our next question from Melissa Johnston is, if needed to relocate to Camarillo, would spots be allocated to those moving from Oxnard Airport, or would we need to coordinate those ourselves?
I believe that's going to be within a similar time frame or response for that, or it's not a time frame, but my response is earlier is the team is going to be looking at it, investigating that as the design is moving forward, and expect to have answers to address that type of question prior to that next tenant workshop in the January, February timeframe.
All right, and we'll go to the next question, which is from Gerard. Will the hangar access remain accessible during the construction phase? And a second part of that is, will there be dust mitigation during the construction period?
For the first question, if your hangars would be available, and yes, they would be available. The entire airport is not closed. It's just the runway and the taxiway are not available if we're using, as an example, alternative 1. So you'd still be able to have access to your hangars, the pavement in front of your hangars, and also the aprons would be available. And as far as dust mitigation, yes, dust mitigation is part of the plan design. So dust mitigation is alleviated, or dust is alleviated during construction. There's a mitigation plan for that. Jeanette, did I miss anything on the dust mitigation plan? That's really kind of part of the BMPs.
Yes, and then we'll be part of the BMPs will also be sweeping any areas like the service road, and then also we'll install. The contractor will be installing like tracking pads by the airport entrances. That way, there's no construction material or dirt going into the public street.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next, it's really just a comment. It's just addressing that rent should be free on the hangar until the runway reopens. That was from Mike. So Mike, we addressed that, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next question from Mark Swaney again. May we see the FAA safety determination concerning the use of the taxiway for a temporary runway?
Yes, we have that documentation, and that documentation can be provided. We'll make a note of that.
Okay. And the next question from Andrew. For hangar tenants, if we move to CMA during the construction, would we be charged tie down and fees?
I'm sorry, let me back up to that question too that I just answered before. And again, we can provide that at the next tenant workshop too as well. And I'm sorry, can you read that question one more time?
Yes. For hangar tenants, if we move to CMA during the construction, would we be charged tie down fees?
And again, that kind of goes along with the other items in looking at the relocation or reduced rent. And again, the county team will be investigating those options with it, and then have that information at the next workshop. And again, I'll go back to the one about the FAA determination. We can provide that at the next tenant workshop, the FAA's determination on alternate 4.
Okay. Next question comes from Andrew Borden. If there is any shortfall in funds, how will the shortfall be handled? Increased fees, rents for airport users, or county general funds?
Well, as far as if you're discussing budget, if you want to call it a shortfall or not enough money in the construction budget, that's kind of why we look at a base bid for the project and an added alternate 1 and an added alternate 2. And the FAA has been involved with the planning level numbers for the project, and that's what they go to then obtain a grant on. And then when the grants or when the bids are open, when the project's all designed, it goes out to bid, and we have a public bid opening after approximately 30 days, and we determine a low responsive bidder, then we'll go to the FAA based on a grant. And typically, the FAA normally, if based on the estimates that have been done, the bids are typically close in line with what the available money is from the FAA to do at least the base bid. So if there isn't enough money to do the project, then we probably just do the base bid and potentially not do alternative 1 or alternative 2. And that would have to be done at a later date through the FAA.
All right, and they added a clarifying comment to that. I was thinking of the 10% the FAA won't contribute.
And the sponsor share or the matching fund for the grant, that actually works out, in the county budget, but we can also provide more information on that for the next tenant workshop and how that's going to be addressed.
All right, and the next question comes from Paul. Did anyone consider a less intrusive rehabilitative overlay to extend runway life by 10 to 15 years?
So we did consider that as part of the preliminary design. So right now, as I mentioned, this is planned to do a reconstruction of the pavements. And we did investigate versus a rehabilitation, which is what you would consider a mill and overlay. So you mill a portion of or grind a portion of the asphalt off and then put down a new asphalt layer. But based on the subgrade value and condition, that would not be a good use of funds, because really it's the subgrade and the substructure that's supporting that asphalt, which is just a cap of that structure. So it was determined through geotechnical investigation, and I'll let Jeanette maybe go on a little more on this, that a reconstruction effort is really the better and the less expensive way to do that, or the better way to do this for a longer pavement life. If we just do a mill and overlay, we're not going to get a very long lifetime out of this. And when we're using, as far as what FAA is looking at, the FAA is looking for at least 20 years of pavement life on a pavement improvement project with an AIP grant. Jeanette, do you want to add anything more on that?
No, basically, yeah, what you said, Chuck, is correct. Yeah, we look at the doing a rehabilitation versus a construction, like Chuck mentioned, and we presented it during the first workshop too. And yeah, since existing conditions of the existing subgrade at Oxnard Airport, it's basically we'll have to do a line treatment in order for the pavement to last for a longer time. So we do a rehabilitation. It will be just removing a little portion of the asphalt and putting it back, so that won't solve the problem. So we'll have to go back at an earlier date than if we do a one-way reconstruction.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. And this is more of a comment, so I'll just read it, but I think we've already sort of addressed this. We don't really understand why no county plan for supporting the tenants has been addressed yet. This is already the second of only 3 workshops. Maybe Mr. Turner can explain why nothing is yet available. That was from Mark Swaney. And then the next question is from David Lunn. Do we really need this runway upgrade, or is this being justified by getting free money from the FAA?
Again, during the kind of like we talked about, we initially looked at rehabilitation or reconstruction, and the pavement is at, or the pavement section, which includes the subgrade, is at based on the geotechnical investigation that was done. And that means we took cores and bores. We looked at materials that was laying that is down below the pavement that you cannot see, and that's evaluated. And based on that condition of that, it was determined that reconstruction is necessary to keep the runway in good condition that's safe and available to use for aircraft.
Okay, and this is our last question and comment that we've received so far. So if you have any additional questions or comments, please either raise your hand or put them into the chat. This one's from Mike. It's more of a comment. I think it might have just been a response to someone, but tie down on open ramp is not equal to weather protected and locked storage of planes and hangar storage at Oxnard.
Okay, and is that the last comment / question?
Yes, so that is, okay, so we just got one more comment from Mark, and he is asking, why is the county not participating in these workshops?
I guess the county is, I mean, we are the county team, so we are the county representing the county. So we're addressing the design and the design considerations that have been evaluated for this reconstruction of the project.
Thank you. And yes, that was the last comment that we have in the chat function. And I don't see any hands raised. So I guess we'll give people another couple of seconds to leave their comments if they have any, or raise your hand and let us know if you'd like to speak.
While we're waiting, can we go back just one? I think it's one slide. Yeah, there we go. Just to show the, if you do have any additional questions, comments, that you can provide them either on the email that's shown there on the screen or on the helpline number. So the email is at Oxnard Airport Runway at arianoassociates.com, and then the helpline number is the 909-313-0549.
Thank you, Chuck. And we actually got a couple more questions from Gabriel Tehran. He is wondering, where can this recording be accessed later for later viewing by the public?
Stacy, I'll let you address that.
Yes, so this recording should be available on the county website shortly after the meeting. So just give us a day or two, maybe a few days, and that will all be up for your viewing pleasure.
Thank you, Stacy. And then another question from Mark Sullivan. If the use of Taxiway F as a temporary runway for light aircraft was dismissed for safety reasons, what were the assumptions? Was the safety analysis based on use of a temporary runway by Cat 1 aircraft, less than 4,000 pounds, or by all categories of aircraft? Are the safety considerations discretionary or mandatory? If the latter, can you give specific citation?
And we'll be able to provide the additional information that actually was done at the next workshop from the FAA and what was submitted to the FAA, but it was just for the smaller aircraft. It was not we were not considering it to be used by all aircraft, i.e. the bigger twins, turbine aircraft, jet aircraft. It was just the small single engine aircraft or category 1 aircraft. And with that, the FAA has design criteria, and that's an advisory circular called Airport Design. It's 5300-13. And in there, it has dimensions for the object-free area, the runway safety area, and then what is allowable to be used when a runway is being considered. And with that, we had objects penetrating both the object-free area and the runway safety area, along with Part 77 obstructions. And Part 77 is that's an evaluation of an imaginary surface that comes off the sides and off the ends of the runway. And it's looking at our objects penetrating this surface that is there to protect the aircraft and the pilots.
And Chuck, I'll add a little bit more info. So actually, we're going to be presenting the FAA, basically their feedback, or the feedback we got when we presented the taxiway, converting taxiway in Foxtrot as a temporary runway at the next advisory meeting and authority meetings in December too. And just so that we can, so for the small aircraft that we analyze for the parallel taxiway, we basically analyze the type B1 aircraft, and then and approach speeds of 50 knots or more will not be able to use the temporary runway. So that's one of the points that we gave to FAA when we presented this alternative. But again, we'll be providing more information at the advisory commission meeting and the authority meetings in December.
Yeah, thank you, Jeanette.
Okay, it looks like we have a hand raised from Charles McLaughlin. So I'm going to unmute you now. And go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Charles. If you're trying to talk, you're going to have to unmute yourself. So there should be a button on the bottom left of your screen.
I got it now. Okay.
There you go.
I have a mic that I can mute too. The incursion driveway down the just south of Foxtrot, will that be impacted by the construction later on at the completion?
I don't believe so, Jeanette. Do you want to highlight that? I don't think, as far as we're just staying within the boundaries of Taxiway Foxtrot. If there's again, then that goes back to if there's available funding to do Taxiway Foxtrot, which is bid alternative 2.
So is this, the question is for the service road south of Taxiway Foxtrot? For these ones,
Correct.
For this, okay. Thank you, Charles. So for these ones, Taxiway Foxtrot is constructed, since it's gonna be shifting about 60 feet to the south, so that we're able to meet the runway to taxiway distance separation, the separation requirements. So since Taxiway Foxtrot will be shifting to the south, and then the taxiway object-free areas will also be shifting together with the taxiway. So now the service road will be inside the taxiway object-free area. So we're looking to see if we can keep the service road open or if we have to remove it for safety reasons.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette.
We have another question from Mark Sullivan. There is very limited tie-down space at Camarillo. Is there any assurance that there will be tie-downs if a majority of Oxnard tenants move there?
And again, that's one item that we'll look at based on if there's of what aircraft owners want to move over to Camarillo Airport, but we'll look at that as far as and having that additional information available by the next tenant workshop in the January-February timeframe.
All right. We have another question from James Schroeder. What percentage of aircraft operations are light aircraft versus heavy aircraft at Oxnard Airport? Can we get a breakdown of aircraft operations?
We can make a note of that. We can that data would be held by the air traffic control tower as far as what type of operations there are versus, and it's going to be single and multi-engine aircraft versus, heavy aircraft is when you're getting actually into like air carrier type aircraft. But we can make a note of that and provide that at a time of the next tenant workshop.
Okay, and so we don't have any other questions or comments from this chat. So we do have one email that we had received. So unless there are any other comments from those on the line, I'm going to go ahead and read that. This is from Irene Rauschenberger, an Oxnard resident. Has the Channel Islands Air National Guard Station facility at Point Mugu considered to serve as Oxnard's airport? This would free up acreage for a central park of the West. For the future, it would be interesting to know something like this would affect all parties economically.
Right now, so during the design and even the planning stage, the county's other airport which is actually closer than the Point Mugu facility. Is the airport that we're looking as far as alternate use of aircraft if they want to move over there temporarily. So that's the airport that we're looking to use, and it's another county airport versus an airport under a different ownership and closer than to Oxnard than Point Mugu.
All right. And that is the end of the questions that we've received through the chat function. So I guess we can do kind of a final call. If anyone has any other questions or comments they'd like to make, please go ahead and either raise your hand or leave it in the chat function. Otherwise, I think we may be wrapped up with this question and answer session.
Great. Well, this is Stacy, and if there's no other questions, we will thank everybody for participating today. And let me just turn back my camera back on. Here we go. Thank you all who attended today and participated. Thank you for your questions, your insight. All of this has been taken down and will be further analyzed. So we greatly appreciate everybody being, available and very candid. And again, the team is still working through the process. So we will have more answers for you next time. Please be on the lookout for next steps and make sure to take down our project website, email, and contact number for any follow-up questions that you might have. So Stevie, if you can pull that back up one more time.
There we go.
And again, we will plan to host a final public meeting early next year, and we'll follow up with more information as it becomes available. And with that, Chuck, if you have any parting words, we'll wrap up.
No, thank you, Stacy. No, thank you for everybody's participation and time and attendance for this meeting. So thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Have a great day.